All right, why don't we get started? Good afternoon. My name is John Mayer, and I'm the Executive Director of CALI. I know you always know that, but I always do that in case there's somebody in the room who doesn't know me yet. It's sort of a habit I've gotten into, I guess. The name of this session is if DLE, which stands for Distance Legal Education, is the answer, what is the question? If you're here because you think I'm going to tell you how to do distance learning in detail, that's not what I'm talking about. Although I may show or demonstrate some software or some services. Show of hands, how many people were at the session where I talked about ClassCaster yesterday? About half. Okay. So you may, if I have time at the end, I may do a really quick demo for the rest of the folks because it relates to some of the things I'm saying. All right, let's get started. Always have to start with a what is distance learning, because I found that when I say distance learning to 10 people, I get 10 different, they have 10 different images in their minds of what I'm talking about. And so I sort of break it down by this. There's the obvious, the less obvious, and the completely outside the box things in distance legal education. The obvious ones are video conference courses. A video conferencing system that is being pushed to another school or in both directions with co-teachers or something like that. Web courses, sort of in the Peter Martin mold, or where you do online courses like Concord. There may be lessons or quizzes, there may be PDFs to be read, things like that. Even media by mail, and I don't mean correspondence courses in the old model of the 1920s, but in the new model of shipping DVDs or CDs around that have either the materials on them or the software to install or something like that. The less obvious things are like co-teaching, where it's not one faculty member trying to find enough students who want to learn Roman law at 20 schools, but rather two teachers who have co-written the casebook, maybe saying, I've got my class, you've got your class, we'll put them together, we each teach half the class, or something like that. Guest lecturers, bringing somebody in for a little bit of distance learning, a judge, an attorney, somebody who's not instantly or immediately available, coming in through a video conferencing link, or other mechanisms, which one of them I'll describe. Partial DLE. How many of you know about the ABA distance learning guidelines? Everybody, right? Well, did you know, or you should know, that you can take a regular law school course, you could cancel one of the 3 classes in the week, and say instead, go to a website and do this CALI lesson or listen to this lecture, and it's not considered distance learning. It's not considered a distance learning course by the ABA. All right? The distance learning guidelines let you do a little bit of distance learning in a regular course without having to declare the course a distance learning course. Now, in terms of the distance learning courses, they say you can only have a student can only take 1 distance learning course per semester, a maximum of 12 credit hours towards their JD degree. I think that's the 2 limitations that I know about.
Not in the first year.
Not in the first year, absolutely. And there was one other aspect to it, but I'll probably think of it in a second. All right? And of course, you can take regular courses and have distance learning pieces. And this gets really muddy in my mind, because having students read a case out of a casebook at their home is distance learning. They're not in a classroom, they're not being lectured. They're learning at a distance from the school, so to speak. But I don't tend to think of that as distance learning. Rather, it's more like visiting a website and, for my purposes, running a CALI lesson or viewing a lecture or listening to something like that, taking a quiz, whatever that may be. Now, completely outside the box would be legal education for non-lawyers, the public, for instance. All right? Legal education and possibly for-profit, which I don't know of very many law schools deeply into this. Maybe they're into this in their graduate or their LLM programs, where they will accept people with significant experience in healthcare industry or in something who are also going to learn about legal aspects of their jobs or something like that. But I mean something much different. Legal education for the public, to me a clinic is legal education for the public, because every interaction with a lawyer you learn something. Maybe something you didn't want to learn, but you learn how to manipulate or game or deal with the legal system. If you go on discussion lists or bulletin boards where people do discuss, as they say, non-lawyers, discuss legal issues, it's very much of a storytelling culture where they'll say things like, well, I once got sued for copyright, and here's what I did. Da, 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 da. And everybody else that's reading it is getting a legal education. A bad one, but nonetheless, legal education. Or maybe not bad, it depends. And of course, expanding international opportunities. How many law schools here have had a visit from some sort of Japanese delegation in the last 3 years? Look at that, like 10 or 12. I went to, well, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about my visit to Japan in a minute. All right? To me, the best wedge into faculty who are worried about this, or schools that don't think that there's anything interesting here, is in the less obvious area. Getting people to wholesale deliver entire sort of bread and butter legal education courses is going to be hard, but they might be interested in doing what I would call daily pieces or guest lecturings or things like that, right? Small pieces before the big pieces. Second thing is, to me, the most interesting things that are in the far term here is in the outside the box stuff. And I'll talk about that only briefly later. But I like to think of that, I like to keep that on the table because I think we're on a path towards something. And I'm going to try to make the case to you, and I would actually like your feedback on it. One of my goals in almost all of my presentations is to be just a little bit provocative. I want to provoke you because, one, it's in the afternoon on a hot Friday, and you're nodding off, at least I am. And so if I provoke you, then your heart beats a little faster and you actually listen. That's actually, by the way, by research, a good teaching technique, to be provocative. And second, I need your feedback to know, as I push the envelope a little bit in what I talk about, so that I can get feedback to tell whether what I've said is really provocative. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I say things, and I'll come to a slide where I'll give you an example of that. And I was expecting the reaction, and everybody went, yeah, of course, that's obvious. I was like, oh, I'm learning here. All right. So another way to look at distance learning is that it's synchronous or asynchronous. This is a classic cleavage, right? Synchronous being it's video conferencing, webcast, chat, it's real time. That's what synchronous means. Asynchronous means it's not real time. Anytime, anywhere, I go get something in my own time and decide when I want to do that. Now, the reason why this is a good cleavage here is if you start looking at a series of issues and see what they cost in terms of synchronous versus asynchronous. And the first one I want to look at is course design. With a synchronous distance learning course, you shouldn't have to change the course much. And it's certainly true that the expectation of the non-technical faculty is if you're going to video conference them, well, they just have to show up, and instead of talking to a room, they're also talking to a room plus camera. And maybe there's a TV there with a picture of the other room, and even though the students are smaller, they're still students. You know, and maybe they got to wave a little harder in order to be picked on or something like that. All right? So course design, generally speaking, doesn't change much in synchronous. With an asynchronous course, you have to completely rework the course. Because the students are at a distance, and you can't tell if they're tracking. I don't know how much you know about Concord's course design system, but it's built on like a 26-week model, and the students have to take tests before they're allowed to even see the material, either the next week or the week after. And it's actually color-coded, where if they're behind based on the pacing of the instructor, it goes from green to yellow to red. It's classic sort of interface design, I guess, except for colorblind people. You know, to say, look, you have to keep track, and you take either little multiple choice quizzes, or you submit essays, or something that demonstrates not necessarily that you have mastery of the material, but that you have at least gotten you're keeping pace. Now, in live courses, like in this session, if we had 16 meetings like this, 48 meetings like this, or 16 weeks, 3 times a week, you know, I can sort of tell by where people are sitting. There's an entire lore about this, right? The people that sit up in front, the gunners, they're always ready. The people that sit back are hiding. You know, all the ways that that have body language and other things that an experienced instructor says, I know they're tracking, or at least I think I know. Right? I think a lot of it is myth, but myth is truth until proven otherwise, right? So with asynchronous courses, you've got to design it differently, because you've got to package what it is they're going to learn. They're not going to come live, so you have to record it, or you have to give them readings, or you have to give them instructional materials, or whatever that might be. It's a significant investment there. All right? Technology for synchronous is heavy duty in some ways, because video conferencing, although getting better and simpler, you know, you could buy it and plug it in. I'm talking about IP-based video conferencing. It still sort of feels like a black art to a lot of people. We did a survey of law schools, and I'll go over some of the results of that. But it told me that there's still lots of, yeah, video conferencing works great. Haven't used it much myself, and don't know who's running it or things like that. Technology for asynchronous courses is, it depends. If all you're doing is shoving text up on a website, to me that's pretty light technology. Frankly, if you're writing a CALI lesson, that's pretty light technology. It's just a piece of software, right? Now, if you're producing videos of the Ken Burns jazz quality to be put onto DVDs and mailed around, well, that's heavier use of technology and tech staff and things like that. All right? If you're doing flash animations that display certain topics with call-outs and things like that, well, that's programmers or at least graphic designers and things like that. All right? So technology is a differentiator between synchronous and asynchronous in the way that it's a different set of technologies, and it's also a continuum depending on how heavy you're investing, right? Staffing. Does anybody disagree with this statement? When you do video conferencing, you have to have a tech staff available for the entire class. Does anybody disagree with that? Why do you disagree?
I disagree.
So you think you think video conferencing can be done unattended with no tech staff present?
Yes.
Maybe at the beginning and at the end, but not.
Available is different than present. I agree with you.
Okay, I'll be more precise. So present throughout the class, no. Available at the drop of a phone call, yes. See, I would disagree with even that, but one person in the room thinks that you don't have to have somebody there. Are there any? How many people are faculty who teach? How comfortable would you feel if you didn't have that tech person within 3 seconds? Very comfortable?
Well, we've had some video conferencing. We don't have tech people available usually in the evening, and our courses have usually been in the evenings.
Good, and that works well?
The current technology, if you teach the teacher just a little bit about how to turn things on and off, things work.
Great, great.
We didn't give many classes using video conferencing, but initially that was the case. That is some ITs that needs to be. But then after some time, if they just set it up and after that it is going on, they can really even then they come at the end to shut it down.
You made the point that I wanted to make, is that the perception is still, this is from the survey, the perception is still that I got to keep my tech people close because I'm not yet comfortable with it being reliable all the time. And it might be in your situation that you've been doing it enough that your faculty are comfortable with, all right, it's all set up, call me if you need me. And if that's true, that's sort of like a next stage of evolution for schools. Most schools are not there, or I should say most faculty are not there. And that's my opinion. All right? So staffing for synchronous tends to be high when you start, and then it will dribble down. Hopefully it will not be entirely eliminated, but it goes away, it goes lower. For asynchronous is one of those, it depends. If I'm setting up a blog from Blogger and I'm using some service and I'm using Audacity to record my own things and I throw it up on my blog, well, I don't need any staff to help me with that. All right? And my students are all tech savvy. If I want production or programming or special use materials, well, then I need more and more and more staff. And again, that depends on the tech level or interest of the faculty, I guess, right? So it depends. All right, costs. Of course, it's going to cost more, apparently, to do a distance learning course than a non-distance learning course. But it depends on so many different things, right? If you don't own the video conferencing equipment, then it has to be purchased. If you lease or rent it from the university, well, then it has to be arranged. Chances are you might be like Chicago Kent. They own 4 video conferencing units. And I was looking into using them for this session or for this conference, and had to get the guy to open the closet and move the chairs and get the plastic bags off of it and blow the dust off. And I said, well, anybody here know how to use this? Nope. So, meaning if you already have the equipment, then it may already be paid for, and so there isn't any additional cost. Now, where video conferencing might be going, or is going, is certainly to IP-based or even desktop-based, and that brings the cost way down. Certainly, if you're not doing the ISDN, having to set up connections and things like that. All right? All right, scalability. Well, if you can't find enough students who want to take a course in, what was I using before? Say, what, Roman law. It might be that you can scale, you know, I can get 3 students at this school, 3 students at that school. Now I've got 12 students. Now my dean will let me teach this. That's not much, that's not what I mean by scale. That's a very linear scale. I'm thinking more like a geometric scaling capability. And Synchronous doesn't scale geometrically. Even if you don't do video conferencing, if you do webcasting, and then the only live portion is chat, one person can't handle the chatting of 1,200 people or 600 people, or for that matter, probably not 60 people very well or effectively. So synchronous courses don't scale much more than linearly. After 30 students, you're going to have another body, another teacher to deal with it. Asynchronous courses, the hope or the goal is that they do scale. You know, you package it once, you put it on the web, and then you enroll 1,000 people. Except for the part where the credential happens, which is at the exam. Who's going to grade those 1,000 exams? But even that can sort of scale geometrically if that's the only piece that you've got to pull out in a sort of time-dependent manner. Right? So that's the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. And reuse. Well, reuse and scalability are sort of tied up here, right? You don't reuse video conferencing unless you're thinking to take that synchronous thing and turn it into an asynchronous thing. So we're archiving this, we're webcasting this, but we're also archiving it so that years from now people can click on the link and watch John mumble through this session. All right, so it's both a live webcast synchronous distance education, and it's going to be reused later for people's benefit later. All right. So reusability, but reusability is not just recording the video, but also the ability to, well, it's sort of like if you write a CALI lesson, then it could be, once it's written by once, it can be used by 130,000 students. And the way we've written CALI lessons is they're small enough that we were serving up 8,000 or 9,000 lessons per day during the exam period a couple weeks ago. And the server wasn't even running white hot, just red hot, not white hot. All right? So reusability is maybe a differentiator between. Oh, one more thing. Video is actually harder to reuse than audio in some situations, because if you're talking about if you videotaped your course, and let's say for instance you're teaching tax, all right, then you go to the next semester and you say, well, just watch these tapes. But of course the tax laws have changed, so you have to re-record some portions of your lectures. Well, you know, if you're doing a sloppy job, you don't care. But if you want to do a careful job, you've got to make sure you have the same person giving the lecture wearing the same suit in the same room. So there isn't this weird sort of, you know, oh, now he's like in his pajamas, now he's in the blue suit, now he's in the red suit, you know, which would look rather funny. And with audio, you could edit that. And if you got the same person, it's pretty easy. The tools are amazingly good for just slipping in. I'm going to add this thing here, or I'm going to take out these ums and ers, whatever that is. So audio is more reusable than video in those situations. All right, that's it. So why is DLE interesting? Well, these should be a bunch of dubs, and so I'll go through them very quickly. Anytime, anywhere, we've heard that a million times. Student-centered learning model, you know, you pound on that, and I'm going to use that as I'm going to pound on that more by going to a website that I had up. Reload. All right, I lost it. See, I wasn't sure I had my web connection set up here, but I archived what I needed to do here. So maybe one of those things I should have said about distance learning is what? Reliability. Emails, that's what I want to look for. All right, you all got a copy of this in your book, and it was shameless self-promotion by me. I do not apologize. The reason why is we did this survey of students, and we got 250 responses, and some of the responses were like so amazingly positive, and so many of them. And you all are from, or many of you are from CALI member schools. I felt like share the wealth. All right? But the reason why I'm showing you this now, or bringing this up, is there's so much in here, if you read through that speaks to that idea of student-centered learning. Here's students that will tell you things like, I didn't understand what my professor was saying, so I went and did a CALI lesson, got a different viewpoint, and then I understood him better. Or I need to work on things on my own time, and I could be in my pajamas at 3 a.m. and run CALI lessons. Or I don't do well just reading, I need interaction. And interaction helped me learn a lot better. These are all things that are basically saying student-centered learning is good, or why it's good. All right? I'm not blowing the horn on CALI lessons necessarily, but just saying that we pound on that. Well, we pound on that for a reason. And we did a survey, and we got lots of feedback that says it's true. All right? Some of my favorite ones right here. Help me book property. Something you won't see on this is we did ask the question, do you recommend CALI lessons to your friends? And a bunch of people said no. And we asked why, and they said, because it's a good thing, and why should I help them get a good grade? Oh, I thought that was funny. Law students. All right. Attuned to the NetGen, you all know we're immigrants. They're natives to the network generation, right? We came to this country, they were born here, right? Attract or serve previously unservable students if you're in rural areas, or if you wanted to if somebody wanted to go to law school but they were 30 or 50 or 80 miles away but had a job and her family, they ain't going to law school unless there's a distance learning aspect to it. That's where Concord's picking up their students. 1,500 last time I checked, right? Co-optation is maybe something, that's a fancy word, I'm sorry, I made it up. The ability of two schools that may be serving the same constituencies to both cooperate, even though they're competing for a pool of students. But once they've got students, they can after they finish competing for the students, they can then cooperate to deliver a richer learning experience for all of their students. So I'm imagining this along a lot of different ways you cut it. Let's say all the schools in the state getting together so that they can have the best possible learning experience on state-specific legal clinics or something like that. Let's say all the schools in a particular, like a whole bunch of small private schools that are all fourth tier with small faculty. But if you combine the faculty, then they can offer more courses to all the students. So one school with good environmental but no IP, one with good IP, no environmental, combined looks like to the student a school that's got both a good environmental and a good IP program. All right, things like that. And of course, new markets and revenue, which I'm going to get back to because that's that out of the box thing. But to me, the most important thing, this is a personal thing, that's not necessarily something you have to believe. The most important thing about DLE is that it requires faculty and institutions to examine the learning process. All right? One of the things I get asked a lot about distance learning is, well, how do we know that distance learning is any good? Do you have any studies? Do you have any proof? Have you made sure that it's good teaching? And there is lots of studies and stuff, but I often want to say, so what do you know about that lecturing in the classroom stuff? Do you have any studies? Do you have any proof that it's the best possible learning? And there isn't much new learning. It's all old. It's 100 years old. It's the way it's always been done. And the students have changed, and the teachers have changed. We're a century later, we should re-examine these things. And the law has changed. It's a much more complex thing to teach. We're teaching more in law school now than we used to teach. And so I like the fact that this is an excuse to examine this issue of how good is our teaching, or can we make it better. I'm an engineer by training, or by background. And I like to think that there's a continuous improvement or refinement process somewhere in there. And it's not just, this is the way we've always done it, it always works, and we just accept that. All right? So like I said, that was why it's very interesting in CALI. All right. But does legal education need to improve? Does it want to improve? Well, does anybody disagree that it's too expensive? Or some people think it's too expensive? I'll ask the first one. Do you think it's too expensive? Yeah. All right. Well, then you think that lots of people think it's too expensive. All right. Does anybody disagree that some people say the grads don't seem to be ready for practice? I didn't expect a laugh out of that, actually. But I guess I could see why you would laugh. All right. Let me ask this. Are the grads, this is a serious question, are the grads ready for practice? Yes? No? Interesting. So you admit that the product that you all produce is deficient?
No.
Okay.
Depends on the school, depends on the student body, depends on the teachers.
Absolutely. So the goal of law school is not necessarily to produce grads ready for practice, right?
Depends on the
Well,
curriculum.
exactly. Okay. Faculty emphasize scholarship, teaching excellence is not rewarded. That's not an absolute, but it's...
That's true.
Oh. but it's a strong probably, right? I run into that all the time. Here's a little story. Had a law professor, I'm going to get this wrong, was an associate but was going up for full tenure. She was a tenured associate professor but was going up for assistant to associate? I'm kidding, right? Yeah, full professor. All right. Had written a bunch of CALI lessons and submitted them to the P&T committees, and I wrote a bunch of CALI lessons, and they're like, what's this crap? And she talked to me, and I said, we have this tool that takes lessons and turns them into gigantic, long web pages so that people can run them through spell checkers and see the lesson as a big flat thing. And so we ran all our lessons through that and printed them out. It came out to 900 pages. She'd written 900 pages. She put it in 3-hole binders, stuck it in, gave it back to the P&T committee, and they went, ooh, what's this? I mean, it didn't make the decision whether she got promotion. She did get tenure, by the way, full tenure. But it was no benefit at all as a CD. And it was, I can see you've done a lot of work when it was paper. Right? But in both cases, it wasn't that valuable because it was teaching material. All right. So here's a little exercise for you. What else would you say is broken in legal education? Are these the only three, or what else do you think is broken in legal education? A little bit of interactiveness here. Wayne?
The sense among many law students that the third year is simply wasted.
Third year wasted. Oh, yes. I love that one. Does anybody disagree? Does anybody disagree that students think the third year is wasted? Some students do, but not all students
Some
do.
students, but in our school we have a whole lot of them that are really grateful for the third year.
What school are you at?
Thoreau.
Thoreau? Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious. All right, what else is broken, if you think something's broken about legal education? You and then you.
One thing we're finding out is that our students have a different way of learning, so the learning experience is totally different. But the teaching experience is pretty much staying the same.
Well, does that fit with that teaching to the net generation thing on the previous one? All right, so the students have changed. Teaching, let's say learning styles are different. You out in the back there? There. Go ahead.
It's one of the, one of the professional schools that doesn't necessarily require you to have any practical clinical experience like medicine, pharmacy, whatever, where you're actually dealing with clients. You can go through 3 years of a totally classroom academic experience, take a test, and quote unquote be prepared for practice.
Clinic not required.
Not everywhere. Montana. Well, they're all required. In fact, that's
Good for Montana.
Well, third year students like their better because it's always a clinical experience.
But if you're at a school that doesn't require grads to be ready for practice, it's going to be de-emphasized, obviously. Right. And what else is broken in legal education? Come on, it's got to be, it's Friday afternoon, you got to be a little annoyed and hot and colicky, and you should come up with millions of things, right? Well, what's broken is I'm not paid enough. That's what's broken. Go ahead. And then you.
About, and it plays off of two, but actual different modalities of learning, not just the style that's changed, but the realities of that human beings learn in different ways, but also to support kind of one way.
It's a teaching monoculture, is what you're saying. Yeah. All right, great. Mr. McLeod?
Time spent on expressing yourself. You have a massive amount of information, but as far as doing litigation, not enough trial practice, not enough, not enough real life experience. Do a lot of book learning, not, translating that into.
Pretty much the same as no clinical or no practical.
Well,
Because clinics aren't necessarily. No, that's not the right way to say it. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, but it doesn't. The trial practice, they don't spend a lot of time in trial practice.
That's right.
The clinic is one environment, people fighting for their housing, people.
No, I know what you're saying. Maybe like practice and litigation skills, which are not necessarily clinic skills, but are part of lawyering skills, aren't emphasized enough.
How do you approach the bench? How do you deal with the judge? How do you?
Let's call those meta skills ignored. All right, let me add one of my own. This one came at me when I was giving a talk similar to this, and it's that students just want the credential. And when you think about that one for a little bit of time, it hurts, right? Look, whatever. Just give me the information that I can regurgitate back to you to get the grade, to get the credential. So, what if students could just pay you $100 grand and you gave them the JD? And if they pass the bar, they got to keep it. First of all, how many students would go for that? No, you guys are going to say a lot. That's so cynical. That scares the hell out of me. That it's so bad, it's so broken that the students just. Actually, I had an instructor in graduate school. I'll get to you in a second. I had an instructor in graduate school when I got my master's in computer science. Brilliant guy. Man, he could fill the board with equations that took what were they taking out? Algorithmic analysis, where you did lots of calculus. But he would walk in every day with a rope for a belt, and sandals, and he'd go, "Oh man, I got a hangover today. How about we just blow up class?" And of course, the students were like, "Yeah!" And we all left. And one day he came in and he admitted, education is the only business where the producer and the consumer both conspire to cheat the consumer. Class dismissed. And that always stuck with me as, yeah, you're right, I'm paying $500 an hour here and I'm happy to leave. I must be insane. But it felt that way sometimes.
I was going to say, I don't think that the students do that because education is broken. They just come in, and at least my experience with a lot of my students, and this is very cynical, is that a lot of them they come with a group with a sense of entitlement. And they think they're entitled to certain things. And part of it is they figure they're entitled to this degree as long as they pay a certain amount of money. It's a consumer culture. And that is not necessarily, and in fact, this consumer culture is not necessarily indicative that law school education is broken. I don't disagree with much of the rest of what's been said, and I don't disagree with the need for improving quality, but the fact that they would pay $100 grand, take their degree, and take their chances with the bar is not necessarily indicative of the fact of law school education.
I'm not attempting to provoke you here, but let me negotiate by saying something's broken. It may not be legal education there.
Fair enough.
All right, good. Very good. Excellent exercise. This is useful to me in terms of feedback. I hadn't heard some of these before. All right? So, okay, I've been down. I want to take you 5,000 miles, or I guess that would be like 22,000 miles. Let's go 22,000 miles out. This is very high-level thinking. This is way, way, way out of the box. And I want to say to you that law is more important than ever. All right? A story I heard from an earlier session. I don't know who was at Randy's session on why students do or don't use CALI lessons. Some of you? All right, a few of you were. Well, then let me tell the story as I heard it through 3 other people. But I understand you had a lot of trouble getting a survey out to students because of the liability issues or the difficulty of being sued for privacy information, and that you had to include a half-page disclaimer in front of it. Sorry?
When you do a survey, you're thought to do an experiment on human subjects, so you have to clear all the institutional review.
Are we in a Soviet state? That's freaking stupid. That's my opinion. That's stupid. But that illustrates sort of one of my points, is law is more important than ever. It's invading every portion of our lives. Everybody, law is a spectator sport. You know, how is Michael Jackson going to do in this case? And OJ and things like that. And it's more important than ever just because it's becoming more of something that we have to deal with. There's both good and bad here, though. All right? Let me go through a few of these things. It's more ubiquitous than ever. This is an example. Even doing a survey requires half-page disclaimers. All right?
There's more page and a half.
Page and a half, even more. All right, law is non-violent war. You're fighting the other side, but you're not killing them. You're not hitting them. Right? Usually there's a bunch of lawyers, and then there's a war, and then afterwards there's a bunch of lawyers. So lawyers did a bracket war, in fact. It's not violent in the sense of what we're seeking to do in Iraq, and I think in other countries, is bring the rule of law, democracy, where lawyers decide disputes, not guys with guns or despotic rulers or kleptocracies. All right? Remember, I'm way up here at 22,000 miles. Law is friction to business. I want to do something, oh man, I got to get a license, I got to get a permission, I got to go do this, I got to do that. And friction, and business doesn't like friction, or at least it wants to be able to overcome friction. Sometimes it can't because the regulations are very complicated. I'm not necessarily a deregulationist, I'm just saying that laws do prevent or are friction to business. And therefore interesting to business so that they can reduce, eliminate, get around, deal with in an efficient manner. All right? That's part of that law. Is more law is codified morality. I'm very close to religion here. I will admit it. All right? Law is codified reality. Some people think that law should be codified reality in this country today. To a large degree, it is, because it was the founding fathers' way of thinking. The whole Western ideal of civilization is a bit of a codified morality, and hence it's very personally important to people, as we see today. All right. Law is advocacy's sharpest tool. How many students are in school because they want to go get a law degree so they can go sue somebody, or save the whales, or stop the liberals, or whatever it is? All right? And there's all sorts of things you can do. You can hold rallies, you can raise money, you can do newsletters, but so many of those things come to a point at a lawsuit. Right? So advocacy often is something that lawyers, or it's a tool, law is a tool of it. This is the thing I said before. Law practice is legal education to clients. Every time they walk into a courtroom to pay a parking ticket, deal with a legal regulation, talk to a lawyer, whatever it is, they're learning something about the system. Mostly they're learning to hate it, or they're disgusted with it. But sometimes they're also learning how to game it, right? Oh, is that how that works? Well, now I'll comply with the law next time. Usually if it's something that they didn't know they should comply with and they agree. All right? So it's not always a negative thing. Sometimes it's very much a positive thing. So in short, everyone should be a lawyer. Now I put this up in front of a whole bunch of European academics about 2 months ago. And they went, mm-hmm. Now they're in the EU, right? Where everybody's having to be a lawyer at CD because they're trying to merge 25 different legal systems. They didn't think this was that provocative. Now they laughed at first. They're like, oh man, the American, oh, you mean everybody should sue everybody? And I'm like, no. I don't mean everybody should be a litigator. I mean everybody has to have more legal knowledge that they have right now. More legal experience, more legal literacy. All right? Let me try to make that case. We didn't used to question our doctors. This is before I was born, but the doctors say, well, you got to do this, you did it. Or you ignored them and you died. Right? You had something wrong, boom, you're in the hospital. Or the doctor came to your house, oh, I'll take care of it, Now you get a disease, it's like, well, www.disease.com. What is this about? Or WebMD. Before I go to my doctor for my stress test, I'm going to be looking up sort of the latest papers, because I want to know what he's going to say. I want to understand his vocabulary. I have this funny pain, and I wonder if that's one of those symptoms, and I want to bug him about it. And he's going to roll his eyes. But he'll endure it, because all of his patients now visit the web before they come to him. There's advocacy groups for entire diseases and for even small things and so on like that, right? Well, so we didn't used to question our doctors. Now we do. Now we are medically or healthy literate. We used to smoke all the time. We smoke less. Chicago will go smokeless within the next year. I know probably many of the cities you're in have gone smokeless. We may not all work out as much as we should, but now we feel guilty that we're not. Whereas 30, 40 years ago, we didn't know that we should feel guilty about it, right? The food pyramid doesn't have red meat all over it anymore. All sorts of health and medical literacy is out there. We didn't used to know so much about computers. It's amazing that I'm in a room. Worse than that, it's amazing that I'm walking around with, a gigabyte of RAM on my computer, a gigabyte on my keychain, 256 meg on my camera, 256 meg on my watch, more memory than was probably in the country in 1960. When I graduated in 1983 with a degree in computer, let me reverse that around. You know more than I do about computers than when I graduated with a computer science degree in 1983. Right? You can talk about file systems and operating systems and other things like that. I'm not talking about the geeks necessarily. It's just in the air. Everybody knows a lot about technology. It's part of the whole we used to call it technical literacy. You remember that early in the PC world, it was like, oh, we got to have PC literacy classes for our kids. And I was thinking, man, just wait a few years. And sure enough, it's just part of everywhere, right? So technical literacy is out there. Well, legal literacy, I think, is the next big global societal literacy wave. I don't have great evidence for it. I just see a whole bunch of little data points, like page and a half EULAs in front of surveys, and I know education programs by the RIAA on what piracy is, and going to a movie and sitting there before the previews, having them come out and say, you wouldn't steal a DVD, you wouldn't steal a purse. Well, downloading music is stealing. And it's like, well, first of all, that's your opinion. But it's a legal opinion, right? It's something that can be legally parsed. And the fact that they have to teach me this legal opinion says that they're trying to do some legal literacy here. The problem is people aren't literate enough about this law. All right? All right. 22,000 miles. 10,000 miles. 200 miles. 20 feet. 200 feet. Back home. All right? I love Google Maps. So why is DLE interesting? Well, back down on the ground, let's say it's defensive distance learning. There are online law schools, and they are succeeding. All right? You guys got a monopoly, though, but sometimes monopolies don't stick around forever. The APA gives you that monopoly, but the APA gets it from the Supreme Courts, right? Essentially. But they are succeeding. There are new for-profit law schools, and that's not a bad thing, but their goal is not tenure and scholarship. Their goal is profit. You can have multiple goals, but they're not interested in those scholarship for its own, right, or academics for its own sake. They're interested in getting that student graduated who wants to buy the credential and who can pass the bar. Passing the bar is just is like the same thing as buying that guarantee at Circuit City, right? You want the 3-month guarantee. If you drop it, we'll come to replace it. If you don't pass the bar, maybe they'll let you come take the third year over again or something like that. So they are challenging the traditional model of legal education by saying that academics are not the most important thing. All right? There's a huge unmet demand for legal assistance. Do I have to go any deeper than that? Do you know about that? 80% of all free people that deserve or are eligible for legal aid don't get it because there's not enough lawyers in the Legal Services Corporation and things like that. Lines are enormously long. I did a project. I've done some projects that consolidated information on websites for SRLs, self-representing litigants. It's just amazing how many people want help with legal information, legal literacy, and can't get it. And part of the problem is language barriers and economic issues and things like that. All right? And there's huge increases in SRLs and greater demand for access to justice. I worked on the Law Live, one of the Law Live lists a few years ago, and I wish I could find the post, but it was, essentially a state county law library law director basically said, in the last 3 years, the number of lawyers that walk in my door has dropped 80%, and the number of self-representing litigants has tripled, 300%. And so we're all doing nothing but giving, not legal advice, but legal finding advice all day long. So they're bearing the brunt of it, and so are courts. All right? So what are the DOE compellers? What is compelling schools to look at DOE? All right, well, maybe they want to make money. I don't think that's too strong at this point. Maybe they want to be defensive. They don't want to lose money. Maybe they don't want to lose academic control to these other markets. That's probably not true. Or maybe it's through altruism. I think all these are pretty weak, actually. So this is our next exercise. What is compelling? Why are you at this session? Sorry. Why do you think your school wants you at this session? Why are you interested in distance legal education? For what purposes?
Some of the things you're getting at, a handful of Jesuit schools like Loyola New Orleans, that's part of our mission, is serving the needs of the community. And so we're private, we're open to the public, and
law with a Christian angle?
not just Christian, it's a service thing.
Oh, so it's the altruism one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And so we're talking about DVDs and computer lessons the other day. I can do stuff like the lectures I do for the students and reproduce them for even cheap. Start selling them.
Okay, so saving your students money should maybe perhaps be up there.
Not students, public.
Oh, saving public.
Like your 80% of the legal aid isn't being met. I don't have time to spend 3 hours with every person off the street walks in, but I can give them a 3-hour lecture.
Sit them down in front of a DVD and let them learn a little bit of legal research.
Or for the cost of the plastic disc that takes a copy, I'll let them have one.
Oh, awesome. Interesting. Or those who can pay, charge them $5 so you can
There's
sustain
also
it.
a public access network in New Orleans I'm thinking about finding out.
All right.
It fell on the right
Great.
time.
It's geography. Montana's isolated from the rest of the country, and we're also we have the population.
Forgot
of
geography.
We have the population of Vermont, and so but we're a little
The size of Alaska, yeah.
Right.
You're in Missoula, right?
Right.
Yeah, and so,
Yeah.
but the capital is Helena.
No, yeah,
but so which is how far away?
Technically, real Missoula is.
Oh, well, that's where the state capital is.
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
lobby.
they're down there. But we have faculty that have an interest in producing some law content for undergraduate courses at tribal colleges, which are spread out.
Undergrad. So we see law bleeding down. They're calling it criminal justice, or they're calling it civics, or they're calling it other things. You don't want to call it legal education because you're not giving JDs to those people. No. Other reasons. Why are you here? Why are you here? I'm asking you guys personally. Why are you here to learn about distance learning?
Well, we want to make our upper elective course curriculum more robust and offer courses that we couldn't offer otherwise.
Efficiency. Should have put efficiency up there. I knew this list was crappy when I made it. All right, very good. Was there a hand up there? Yes.
We often, as a day in the life sort of experience, we taught a national course this past year with where we actually involved Mexican people and people in Montreal, Canada, who gave specific real-time issues. One of our professors has had some of his graduates go down and work for the Department of Transportation, and an element in his class is a distance education video conference with those people in Washington to talk to his students, saying, well, this is what you're going to do. This is what you have to do. And the NAFTA program is exceptionally well received and exciting because these were people who were responding to the free trade agreements going across the southern border and across the northern border as far as trucking and commodities movement and all kinds of stuff.
Very good. All right. Well, you pretty much answered the next question. What is it ideally? Because I guess I could have condensed that into just one sort of exercise there. But here are the barriers that I see to distance learning. Institutional interest. But I'm not worried about that because when we made a call for schools that are interested in CODEC, we got 49 members, which was about 25 more than I expected. And so there's enough interest out there to move forward with this idea. Aversion to pioneering. People are trying all sorts of things, but they're scattered and sort of hidden a little bit. But they're out there. Technical challenges? I don't think there are technical challenges. The technology already exists. It's like William Gibson says, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. Technology exists. We don't have to invent new technology here. We have to figure out how to use the existing technology, the web, video, sound, audio, in ways, and they're like what Stephen Weber said at the first plenary, it's a social engineering problem, not a technical engineering problem. I believe. All right? These are the big problems. Finding the markets. I want to sell my classes, who's buying? I want to buy some classes, who's selling? All right? Administrivia. All right, so we start in September and end in June. You start in August and end in May. Oh, we take all the Jewish holidays off. Oh, we take Earth Day off. Oh, we don't do this, we do that. It's all that sort of coordination of calendars. We use a 1, 2, 3 grading system. You use ABC. Those things have to be worked out. And there has to be a page and a half in front of every single one of them explaining how you're not being used as an experimental subject, right? Quality. Everybody, a lot of people are saying, I hope CODEC helps with the quality of education. And it's like, well, I don't know if I can measure the quality of distance education because I can't measure the quality of regular education. I don't know what that means to measure quality of education, except what's your bar passage rate, which is how the student measures it, right? And what does everybody else do? And everybody asks me that. Well, we might be interested in distance learning, but what's everybody else doing? So it's time to find those things out. Is Pat Bea here? Ken? Just wondering. Okay. So that's what CODEC's all about. The goals are to lower those barriers, address an N-by-N problem. I'm hoping you've all seen that one before. Create web services, maybe do some training. I don't know, not yet. I'll see if I can explain why. Bring to the surface this scattered interest. Don't have everybody starting from scratch, figuring everything out, doing some applied research. Let me cover some of those things. Obviously, this is a short intro. We're going to observe, report, disseminate, innovate, facilitate. Sounds like a corporate training. All right, so far we got 48, 49 members. We've got a website. I've been doing lots of presentations recently, selling the idea that people should be interested in distance learning. Almost this exact presentation. I apologize if one of you have seen it before. I've been to Japan and Europe. I was the keynote speaker at BILITA, the British Irish Legal Law Education Technology Association. It should have been ULITA, because there were Hungarians and Greeks and Romanians and French and all sorts of Europeans there. And I had previously talked to them about the idea of an international CODEC, because I'm already thinking I'm helping some of the U.S. law schools get their market finding skills together. We should also then pull in the Europeans, and I'll see if I can also find other ties in other countries. And they said, no, we don't want to join CODEC. We're going to start our own CODEC. You don't have to join you silly Americans. No. there was a little bit of a sniff to it, but it wasn't. But I was like, but they already got the idea. They're grokky, all right. In Japan, couldn't get their attention because they are so caught up in opening 60 new law schools 2 years ago, changing their bar passage rate from 1.5% to 3%, ripping out their undergraduate legal education model and turning it into a graduate legal education market. And so they're just freaking out. And that's why they're all visiting us and running around and taking pictures. They're just too busy. No, I'm serious. when I visit over there, it's like, before the handshake or the bow, it's the picture. And so, I don't think they're going to surface, so to speak, on these technical issues for a couple of years yet, or maybe there'll be spikes of interest as individuals sort of figure that out. All right? Peter Martin wrote a distance education course on distance legal education, and how many of you checked it out? Yeah, the crickets. Not many. So training's okay too. So training's you're not ready for training yet. Because Peter's got one of the most successful distance education models around. He's been doing it for 7 years. He's making money at it. And nobody's interested in seeing how he does it. Not that interested in this. All right? All right, I'm going to focus on these things, and I'm almost done, so it's going to be a fast one. The video conferencing survey, the most interesting thing there is 20% don't use, 17% have it in the university, and 25% have no facilities at the law school. That's a chunk. That's half the law schools aren't really that much engaged in video conferencing. So that idea of synchronous is going to be hard when you call half the schools. All right? It's not that they won't admit that they don't do it, but they're going to have to put the phone down and say, so who's the video conferencing guy? Do we have any video conferencing equipment? They're going to have to go find it. All right? At least from this survey. To me, that's the most interesting thing because it's the opposite. Last year, or 2003-04, 40% did use video conferencing for an entire semester-length course. I don't believe that number. Or it must be some funky artifact. But it just seems like I can't believe 40% of the schools, well, maybe 40% of the 70. Maybe it's because it was a self-selected group.
Sometime in the past?
No, that was in the last year.
In the last year.
Yeah. But that does say that there are some people using video conferencing quite a bit. All right. It is now available, but we haven't announced it, so this is a bit of an official announcement. If you go to the CODEC website, you can post one of two things. Courses that you are willing to offer for other people to take. Not students, this is school to school. Or courses that you would like to buy, maybe would like to buy, if somebody would just please offer them. All right? Yes, this is exactly the same as what you find in the SEALs thing. But we're not competing. To me, it's more the merrier. Let's all see if we can find lots of people to do this. There's some metadata you have to enter about the information, and that metadata about the courses, and that metadata will get richer over time. Meaning we'll ask, well, how were you teaching this course? Who's teaching this course? Have you ever taught a course like this before? We gotta, because that's what people want. They want more information about, as their sophistication level goes up about distance learning, they're going to want to know more. You're just going to do this asynchronously, synchronously, blah, blah, blah. So that's available right now at codec.cali.org. Grades and calendars. Calendars are a slog. Man, I had a student go to every single law school website and find the calendar. And 3/4 of them, he couldn't find it. It's hard to find your academic calendars online. I wish you could all just email it to me in a database format.
What about Elmer's bookmark program?
Yeah, that was a second try, and he got 20 schools. The point is, I want to sort of create a national database of academic law school calendars. But then it changes the next year or something like that. But I think we just have to slog it to gain a greater understanding of where people's calendars sort of fall. And I'll bet once we do it once, we'll find, okay, everybody's pretty much a June school or a July school, a May or June ending school or something like that. All right, grades we need a deft touch here because understanding the Byzantine architectures of your grading systems, I understand Chicago Kent's. I spent 3 months programming the system here. There is so many if statements in that program. And I just figured out before this session, I need help. I need a consult here, somebody who would be willing to do what I would call a comparative study of grading systems that involves the gathering of information about law school grading systems. And I'll bet somebody's done something like this. And I haven't had a chance to search the journal literature yet. But if somebody's interested in something along those lines, which is to say, CODEC will pay you to do that, CALI will pay you. You can call and we'll talk about it. All right? All right, I'm pretty much done, and it's exactly 3:31. And I was gonna, if I had a minute left, I was gonna demonstrate ClassCaster, but I don't. So if you're interested in ClassCaster, stick around, and I'll wait 5 minutes so you can go get a pop or something, and then come back, and I'll do a 5-minute demo back in here. But I'm done.
So what is that?